Ron, thanks a lot. Mark, thanks for the good lead in here. Sinclair Broadcasting, I'll tell you a little bit about us first. We're one of the largest broadcasters in the US. We have somewhere around 200 distribution channels. That includes over-the-air channels as well as digital channels. My role at Sinclair is to manage all of the media coming into and going out of all of our distribution channels. That includes commercials, we call them spots, promos, syndicated content, long form content, all of that for all of our stations comes through our systems and then goes out to our distribution channels. We process somewhere around 14,000 pieces of content each week, which is fairly large for a broadcaster. What I'm going to be talking to you today about. Oh, let me tell you a little bit about myself first. Prior to joining Sinclair, I worked at a media management company where I was CTO for about 8 years. For 15 years before that, I was in product management at the Associated Press, which creates tools that newsrooms use to create news. Then prior to that, I had various roles at CBS and direct broadcast companies. And before that, I was actually producing news as a photographer and a shooter. Um, let's see here. So it's the good and the bad, right? At Sinclair, we believe that good AI enables efficiencies by allowing our staff to do more quickly. And more means not only more things, but at increased levels of quality. And we also believe that bad AI is a present threat to our audiences, our brand, and our operation. So those are the two themes that I'm going to try and dive into here. And by the way, feel free to shoot questions and interrupt as we go along. So for the good AI, a lot of people don't realize that we apply AI very early in our process of selling spots to advertisers, particularly in local markets. Our sales teams use a tool in which, when they go out to pitch somebody on buying advertising on one of our distribution channels, they plug in information about the person they're going to visit, the business, etc. It then creates presentations for them, very focused presentations that they use to pitch and then sell the spots to the local advertiser. We are looking at tools right now that will actually generate the spots themselves, much like what Mark demonstrated earlier for TikTok, but these are for broadcast. Our standards are a little bit different from those. Sometimes they're a little bit longer spots that we generate, and we're a little bit slower to adopt those because of those reasons. But we're definitely headed in that direction. In fact, we have some of that in early production now. We of course use AI for business analysis, uh, just focusing our business and our sales and operational analysis. We use it there, and also engineering analysis for things like how much is it going to cost us to store 5 petabytes of content for a year? So we can get quick answers out of AI using those tools that take into account numbers of variables for us, make some of those calculations a little bit easier. Now, the interesting stuff. Um, when we get into editorial, this is where in my opinion, the potentials for us really go up, particularly with AI generated content. Um, we have some very interesting opportunities with video. And since we're following TikTok, I'll tell you that just this morning I was on an evaluation call with a company that was pitching an AI tool that was attempting to convert um, the video that we bring in from the field in our broadcast cameras into various versions for TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all the digital platforms, and to do that automatically. It's a heavy lift whenever you start off with content that was generated for one particular distribution channel and try and automate its rendering into another channel. And I'm just going to say there's some people that are close to that, and there's some people that are not close to that. And I think it's a challenge for much of the industry. For audio, we have some very interesting applications of AI, including not only the normal speech to text transcript generation, which is very useful for us in news, but also doing translations. Tennis Channel is one of Sinclair's properties, and we played with some tools there that will automatically translate English into another language. Spanish was what we used. And not only does it generate the voice behind that, but it also matches the lip sync. So it looks pretty much like the person is speaking Spanish, even though they don't speak Spanish. This has been very important to the folks at the Tennis Channel because they're growing their audience into Spain. And so taking content that was generated in North America and then translating into Spanish in a way that makes it more palatable for people to watch in Spain has been a real winner. Now, I don't think we convinced anybody that the person suddenly learned Spanish and was a fluent speaker, but the job that it did was good enough that it did not create any friction to the viewer in watching that content. And the talent that was actually creating that content was very happy about it because it increased their exposure into additional markets. I mentioned text earlier. Uh, Doing translation, speech to text translations, and then using that information, those transcripts, to get second and third order metadata like categorizations and keywords is very important for us to be able to do discovery on content. So we have lots and lots and lots and lots of content, especially when we look back at our archives and our news archives. Tennis Channel alone has over 40 continuous years of content in their archive. So if you play that content back to back, it would take you 40 years to play it. Now, searching through that content can be very difficult. Um, the easy answer is to just put it all through an AI enrichment service and have it do all the object recognition and facial recognition and those sorts of things. And that will give you lots of metadata, but you probably can't afford it because it's very expensive to run that type of analysis on every frame of a video stream that, if played, would run for more than 40 years. What we found is the better solution for us is to first run it through speech to text transcript generation, so we get that recording, that record of what the spoken word was. We can then use that metadata to narrow down what we want to selectively apply more expensive and more refined AI tools to. So again, speech to text is pretty much table stakes, and everything we're producing right now gets speech to text generated with it. Provenance and search. Fake media is a problem to us, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But for us, just knowing that content was shot by us, was produced by us, is very important because we need to identify that in our own archive. Our archive contains content that was shot by our own cameras exclusively, but it also contains what we call derivative content. And that is content that came in from another source that we combined with our own content to produce something that we then distributed. We don't always have rights in perpetuity for the content that we combined with our own, which means reselling or repurposing content that's in the archive can sometimes be difficult unless we know exactly where it came from and what the rights are that are associated with it. So provenance is very, very, very important to us. It's not a problem that we're going to be able to solve looking backwards completely. But there are some new tools that we'll talk about a little bit later that give us a better chance of recording all that information, where it came from, who it belonged to, the implied rights for, to record that as it comes into the production chain, goes through distribution, and then back to the archive itself. So some of these last things are higher order applications of AI, but it's based upon the video processing, the audio processing, the derivation of text and metadata. This is audience customization. If we know what is in the content and we have a good description of it, and we know the distribution channel this is going through and what that audience looks like, we can then begin to customize that content for the audience that we are trying to target. So as we talked about earlier, so Mark talked about earlier with TikTok, that is one audience there. You've got Instagram, which is another audience, Facebook, which is another audience, YouTube, which is another audience, and of course, other audiences for broadcast. In broadcast, we have different markets as well. And in addition to that, we have different market segments, age groups, socioeconomic groups that we can target, and those sorts of things. We can apply AI to creating content that is more customized for those distribution channels and those audiences. We can say in a prompt, this is who we are trying to target. Here's their geographic location. Here's their the socioeconomic group that we are targeting in this, and their interests, and that can tell us whether a piece of content is more or less likely to play well with that particular distribution channel. So that comes into the analysis of the content. If we have good metadata on the content and we know what it is, and we know to whom we're going to be distributing that, we can then begin to predict how something will play for that particular market. That leads into coaching. So if we want to take a piece of content and distribute it through 5 online channels, but it's not a good match for one of those 5 online channels, we can use the AI to coach us into humans into making changes to that content to optimize it again for that additional channel. And again, the last thing that we're doing here is adding performance data into that. So it's easy to get performance data from online distribution channels, from broadcast channels. It's a little bit slower, but we're improving that. So we're getting some hard numbers from that now. We can then say, this is how this content that has, again, been described through metadata. This is how this content actually performed for these distribution channels in the past. Now look at this new piece of content and its metadata and predict how it will play to these various distribution channels. So these are things that have been applied for digital distribution channels only for I wouldn't say sometime, but for some time we're looking at ways to apply those more in broadcast now. So bad AI. When we talk about AI generated content, we have to talk about security concerns, because the same AI that can automatically generate your commercial for digital distribution channels or even broadcast distribution channels can be used to fake Zoom calls, fake team calls, and fake content that's coming into the system. And that represents a very serious security concern for us. So we're spending lots of time, efforts, resources, money internally to educate people on both the benefits and the potential threats that AI poses for our business. So phishing, smishing attacks, etc. Our friends at KnowBe4 provide training for us internally that Sinclair uses. Very important that we raise the knowledge of and awareness of those types of attacks so that we don't fall victim to those. The AI can also optimize attacks, not only in terms of social attacks, but on technical attacks. And as I mentioned before, impersonations are definitely a problem whenever you're looking at doing online interviews for people, either for jobs or potentially for editorial content. So we want to be aware of those and avoid those. And the last thing here is inauthentic content. So it's very easy to spot AI generated content on various channels of social media, because unlike most of the broadcast content that's out there, there are very few people that are doing uh, checking on that. There's no gateway, there's no producer, and many of the sources that you will find this content coming from online, it's hard to even verify their bona fides. Who are they? Who are they tied to? And so this has been a problem in the past. It's a problem for individual consumers who are receiving this, because they can't see who generated the content and what their background is. For broadcasters, it is also a problem, because if we see something on social media we want to use on broadcast, or as happens very often, somebody sends us a clip, it just arrives and says, "This is great video. This is a story. Follow it." How do we know that it wasn't AI generated? So, um, AI generated content, there are tools out there that can fairly accurately tell you if something was generated through AI generative processes. Um, but not always. It gives you a score. So there's still a risk, and it is a game of escalation between those tools that are detecting generative media and the generative media itself. And these things are constantly um, going up in complexity, and as the quality of the generated media goes up as well. We are worried about fake spots and ads. One of the scenarios that we will game internally and come up with mitigation methods for are how to avoid fake ads, particularly in political environments. Okay, we don't want to air an ad that says something on behalf of somebody when that person or entity had no part in creating that ad. So knowing where it came from, and was this generative AI media or not, those are things that we really need to to be aware of and make sure that we pin down. We talked about UGC, user generated content. Um, then it gets even more complicated, because we can use that media in derivative content. We can mix something that came in from a social media channel inside broadcast content, and now it is commingled with our content. One, can we keep track of it through provenance? Can we say that this content came from an outside source? This one came from an inside source. What can we do with that? So that is a concern. So we need to keep track of it. For kind of higher level concerns, um, broadcasters don't want to uh, be uh, amplifying or be seen as amplifying false content or fake content, inauthentic content that has come from other sources, because many broadcasters have a brand uh, that there is trust in that brand. And so we want to make sure that the content that we are putting out, we vouch for, and we're amplifying content we believe is true and not it, and that is not fake. Brand protection is one of the highest priorities we have for implementing AI and AI detection tools. It's very, very important to our C-suite. It's easier to talk to our C-suite about brand protection than it is, and protecting us from generative AI there, than it is to talk to them about using generative AI to create commercials. Okay, because the brand is the jewel in the in the corporate pantheon, if you will. With advertising and stuff being very important, but below the value of the brand. So a few things about mitigations and optimizations. And by the way, a couple of generative AI images here. Um, the one on the left, symbolizing working with AI in content production, and the one on the right is reaching a truce with AI on the security front. So the first is knowledge. We need to know, and our staff need to know what AI is, how they can use it, and the threat that it poses to them, and specifically poses to them in their individual workflows. Then we do training on top of that so that we reemphasize that knowledge. And again, I'll do a shout out to Know Before because they've been a great part of that training at Sinclair. Then we want to practice and things like doing phishing practice and smishing practice in email and keeping track of how the staff performs is a part of that. Also, a part of that is practicing detection of generative AI in our pipelines and also our generation of it. Integration is another part, which means automating much of what we talked about before. So it's not just a manual process. And again, we have to measure everything. And that tells us whether all those things above us have been effective or not. And then the last thing we'll talk about is C2PA. And I saw some thumbs up coming along here when we were talking about provenance and how important it is to know where your content is coming from, so you know when it comes from a trusted source or an AI source. C2PA is the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. And Santiago will talk about this a little bit more. But for broadcasters, this is very important so we know and can keep track of content. We know it came from this source and this other content came from another source, and we record that and we do it in a way that it can't be modified later on. This allows us to say this content came from a trusted source, this one did not. Not only can I determine that today, which is important, but 20 years from now, somebody can come and look at that same metadata and there's no doubt in their mind because it was recorded in a secure way that this video came from this camera that was associated with this station and that was owned by Sinclair Broadcasting. So that is the end of my talk there. So I'll throw it open to